the R4 cartridge. The year was 2006, and everybody was playing on their DS. And I mean everybody. What are you doing here, Paris Hilton? You're not a gamer. Oh, shoot! But instead of buying real DS games, a lot of people were instead using some variation of this device right here. A third-party DS cartridge with a little slot for an SD card to load up whatever DS games your heart could desire, as well as do other things. You could play videos or music off of these. You could run unauthorized homebrew and games made by regular people. Here's one called Happy Cat, which just displays an image of a happy cat. That's all it does. It's amazing. The main purpose of these things, though, no matter which one you had, was of course to run backups of DS games that could be loaded up and played as if you owned the actual cartridge. Which of course I do for any games that I put on my SD card. What, do you think I would download these games illegally? I would be very surprised if this device was ever used for any kind of piracy. Wow, I'm surprised. Usually, to pirate games on a console, you need to hack or mod that console in some way. And usually going through the process of doing that is not for everyone. But on the DS, things were different. These SD card slotted cartridges made it easy. Using a modded cartridge was literally just better than buying actual games. What would you rather do? Have one single cartridge with a nice list of every single game you have, and can also play Family Guy episodes, or option B, carry a very cloudy Ziploc bag. There's not a lot recorded on the internet about the days of hacking the original DS, which is really weird to me because there's so much recorded about the 3DS. Everybody's always talking about modding your 3DS, how easy it is to mod your 3DS. Ow. But why is nobody ever talking about its non-3D older brother though? I cannot be the only one wondering how these came to be. So that is what I'm setting out to make a video on today. Not really just today, I've been at this for a couple weeks now. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the history of hacking the original Nintendo DS, how its security was cracked, and all of the different devices and methods for homebrew that led up to the eventual final boss of the Slot 1 flashcard. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored by this desk. This is the FlexiSpot E7 Pro. For me, and I'm not even joking, I have been using this folding table that most people use to hold barbecues or garage sales as a desk for almost my entire life. So this is a big upgrade. FlexiSpot makes primarily standing desks, and I have wanted one of those for a very long time because I like to stand and jump around a lot, and it's one of the best that I have used. You can hold these buttons for up and down. They have little preset buttons so you can save your sitting and standing position, plus 2 more options. I just have them bound to as high as it can go and as low as it can go in case I want to go for a carnival ride, because that's the other thing. You can ride it. It's rated for 440 pounds of load capacity, so that's enough for almost anything you're gonna put on here, including a yeaug. This is also just really nice just for like peace of mind. I don't have to worry about it caving in on me, which was a real genuine concern on my old desk. This guy is the E7 Pro, which is really cool, but if it's a bit outside your budget, they also have the E7 Normal, which is still cool, just with less features. And right now, they are having a sale, and you can also use my code YTE730 for another $30 off. So if you've ever wanted to upgrade from a literal garage sale folding table, now is the time. Thank you so much to FlexiSpot for supporting my channel, and thank you for this desk for providing me hours of fun. Now back to your regularly scheduled bjiru programming. It was the fall of 2004, and everybody was talking about a multitude of things. The second Shrek coming out, a brand new website that just launched called The Facebook, and Nintendo's newest handheld freak of nature that was set to release later that year. Double the power, double the battery life, double the screens, also for some reason. Everyone's a little bit confused, but still pretty excited. The DS launched with 2 ports, slot 1 for DS games, and slot 2 for Game Boy Advance games, and pianos later on. Now obviously at launch there was no DS hacking devices available yet, but there was a lot of Game Boy hacking things. The Game Boy Advance had an expansive library of third-party flashcards you could use, and surprisingly, at launch, these flashcards would work flawlessly in the brand new DS as well. You might think that being an entirely new console, Nintendo would have done something to the DS's GBA port to stop third-party devices like this from working, but they didn't do that, apparently. Third-party Game Boy Advance flashcards are so similar to an actual Game Boy cartridge that changing the DS's port to disallow them could also stop it from running real, genuine GBA games as well. And can you imagine that? You bring home your brand new Nintendo DS and Big Mother Truckers doesn't even run on it? You might as well throw that thing in the garbage. These GBA flashcards running on the DS technically mean they are the first custom code to run on the DS, but not really, because the DS handles Game Boy Advance games in a very weird way. When the DS launches a game from slot 2, it goes into a sort of Game Boy mode, where it sort of becomes a Game Boy Advance for a time. The DS has two processors, one brand new one, and one almost the exact same as the Game Boy Advance before it, but with double the clock speed. When a Game Boy Advance game is launched, it fully turns off this new ARM9 chip and slows the old ARM7 down to the speed that it ran on the Game Boy Advance, and does some other shit to effectively run as if the DS was a Game Boy Advance. So while these GBA flashcards do work, the only thing you can do with them on the DS right now is play Game Boy Advance games, or any custom homebrew GBA games made by the community, which are still really cool. Look, someone made Balatro on here. Can you believe that? So, right at launch, the DS can run Homebrew, but only in Game Boy Advance mode. What if there was some way to get the DS to read things on here whilst being in DS mode? I mean, that shouldn't be that hard. Some DS games that released later on in its life cycle already do use it in DS mode to plug in extra accessories. Things like the Guitar Hero grip, the Rumble Pack, the piano, and the diabetes meter. This is real. On December 31st, 2004, or around there, that's the oldest Wayback capture, a talented hacker from New Zealand by the name of Dark Fader posted this image. This is a picture of the Metroid Prime Hunters demo that came bundled in with most original DSs, displaying some text at a part of the game that it does not normally. The DS is a very nice toy, Dark Fader rules, smiley face. This image was the very first hack ever done to the DS. The way this hack worked was by utilizing a very popular hacking technique of the time, known colloquially as bunch of fucking wires sticking out the back. What this bunch of wires do though is pretty cool. When the DS launches a DS game, a series of things happen. Obviously. The first thing is a check to make sure the game it's launching is a real, genuine licensed game. It checks this by asking the cartridge for a header, basically an encrypted code that only Nintendo has the tools to create that is unique to each and every cartridge. The DS asks for this header, the cartridge passes it along, and the DS says, "Cool, thanks for that. Now let me know where your game ROM is and I'll start it up." Dark Fader's bunch of wires exploits this process like this. A genuine DS game is soldered to one end and the other end is plugged into the DS. When the game is launched, it starts up as normal by requesting the header. The device then lets the cartridge answer, the DS authenticates it, and like normal, it launches the game. But when it gets to the part where this string of text is normally loaded, it goes to the cartridge and asks for the data that contains the string of text. But the device stops the cartridge from answering and instead says, "Oh, that string of text is," you're not gonna believe this, it's actually stored down there in the Game Boy Advance slot. Okay. Dark Fader posted this and a few other images from his Tamagotchi camera to his blog with the entire source code and methods he used laid out for anyone daring enough to try it themselves. And a few months later, in the early months of 2005, someone did. A hacker by the name of Natrium42. Natrium took Dark Fader's design and streamlined it into a much more efficient little circuit board that could be directly inserted into a DS while working the exact same as bunch of fucking wires. Except instead of replacing a message in Metroid Prime, the circuit board would instead block the game from loading at all to just boot straight into a GBA flashcard whilst in DS mode. Pretty clean, pretty easy. The circuit board device was named the Pass-Me. After Natrium put out a basic proof of concept, another hacker named Lynx came on board, and the two of them, as well as a couple other people in the scene at the time, started producing these Pass-Me devices in their garages for anyone who wanted them. And with that, the first purchasable homebrew device was now available. But not a lot of people wanted it at this point. The DS hacking scene was still extremely small. This was still only like 5 months after the DS came out. The only thing you could do with a device like the Pass-Me was run homebrew apps and games made by the community. No pirated ROMs yet. Which, speaking of which, is also a very important topic we should discuss in its relation to hacking. I feel like a lot of people put hacking and piracy in the same boat together. I know I did as a kid. To me, there was no other reason to mod a console other than to download free games. To a lot of people, that seems like the whole point. But really, hackers and pirates are entirely different groups of people that just sometimes overlap. The majority of hackers are interested in hacking for the fun of it, to be able to make a console do whatever they want, or to enable other people to make their own programs and games for it. That's where the term homebrew comes from, a piece of software that a single individual or group of individuals has brewed at home themselves, similarly to how you would do a stew or soup. Most hacking communities start off hacking devices and making their own homebrew games and software, and it's only later on that pirates will use those devices and exploits for their own motives. And that's very much the case here as well. No devices or hackers I've talked about thus far had any intent to enable piracy. They were simply in it for the love of the game. But that doesn't mean no one had any interest. Piracy is a function many people are willing to go to extreme measures to obtain, including spending a bunch of money. And where there is money to be made, there will be some scumfuck company to make it. A few months after Naturium and Link's Past Me hit the market, a company called NeoFlash popped up. NeoFlash had a history of making Game Boy Advance flash carts when it was the main handheld, but now they were back and had a new solution for the Nintendo DS. In May of 2005, they announced the NeoFlash Magic Key, which was a combination of a Past Me-like device and a seemingly ordinary GBA flash cart to run things off of. There were many GBA flash carts like this already available at this point, but the NeoFlash was special due to two reasons. The first was it cost $300, 2x the price of an actual DS at MSRP, and the second, for the first time ever on the DS, you could run official Nintendo DS games off of here. In the box, you got the flash card itself, an adapter to connect it to your computer to load things onto it, and this device that was called the Magic Key. This functioned almost identically to a regular Pass Me device, but with this big block on it for some reason. Now, this was not perfect. It had a very small storage capacity. Any games you wanted to play would first have to be patched by someone to work on the NeoFlash, and the list of patched games when it first came out was very, very small. If those games even worked, there were some that just flat out wouldn't work on the NeoFlash in the beginning. But even with all those shortcomings, it did play pirated games, something no other flash card or homebrew device at all could do at this point. Being a large company aiming to make money off of this, they obviously kept how the NeoFlash worked very hush-hush. But that doesn't mean anyone wasn't working on anything else at this point. It was the spring of 2005 by this point. The smell of blooming flowers and trees was in the air. Me at the Zoo, the first ever YouTube video, had just been uploaded, and Nintendo had begun to notice all of the efforts going on to exploit the DS's current vulnerabilities. Before the NeoFlash, when the DS hacking scene was still relatively small, only running homebrew and custom-made games didn't pose any threat to Nintendo. But the game had changed. Now people were downloading free Mario. It could have just been a coincidence that this happened right around the same time as the release of the NeoFlash, but for whatever reason, sometime in the spring of 2005, Nintendo made a change to all DS's manufactured from that point on, and completely patched out how current Pass Me devices work in their entirety. But the change would only really hold any threat for the next 3 months, up until a guy named Loopy made a discovery. Loopy had taken a standard issue Pass Me and modified it to work with these updated DS models. The catch to this modification though is you could no longer use any game ever in your Pass Me. It had to be specifically programmed to one game to work properly on the new DS models. This specific game right here worked. It was Kokoto Racer. You ever heard of this game? This game fucking rules. This modified version of the Pass Me became known as the Pass Me 2. This is about the moment a lot of other commercial companies started manufacturing their own Pass Me's as well, all with their own unique spin on how to get around the problem of needing a specific game to make them work. Some companies just had a little drop-down menu when you bought it where you could pick what game you wanted and they would pre-program it to work with that game before they shipped it. Some other ones, like this one with Jango Fett from Star Wars on it, for some reason, came with USB adapters you could use to manually program it yourself to work with your game of choice. Side note also, why is Jango Fett from Star Wars on there? I get it, he looks pretty cool on there, but why? What does he have to do with DS hacking? Okay. Some got even more creative than this. This Pass.Me doesn't use a retail game cartridge at all, and that's because inside resides a ROM chip that they ripped out of an actual DS game. It's like the soul of an actual game now possesses this device, forever doomed of an afterlife of torment. I also just like it because it's freakishly tall and just looks so funny when sitting in an actual DS. Like, oh, this guy must be playing a really big game. Yes? Yes. Any of these Pass.Me cartridges worked great for the majority of homebrewers at this point, but they obviously aren't the most convenient of devices. They still required a genuine game to run, and all of them, no matter the design, all took up space outside of the DS slot in some way. Ugh, I want to run Homebrew, but I can't use those, said this very angry man who refused to take off his Nerf case for any reason whatsoever. Luckily for him, and anybody else who didn't want to use one of these big bulky cartridges, there were also many other methods found during this first 6 months of the DS's life. Over time, many other methods for homebrew were found. None were as convenient as the Pass.Me, but for people like Nerf Guy, there were options. Like for example, a hack called Wi-Fi Me was a hack that exploited the DS's download play. If you don't remember DS download play, it was a feature on the DS where if your friend had a multiplayer game and you didn't, his DS could send out a signal that your DS could download the multiplayer version of the game from. So you both could play multiplayer with 2 DS's but only 1 cartridge. It was really so cool. It was a great way to play together, bond with your friends, have a little party. By using a modified version of a very specific Wi-Fi card, you could spoof this signal and pretend to be another DS sending out a download play signal. But instead of a game, it'd make that signal instructions to boot from the GBA port, doing exactly what Pass.Me devices do, but without any physical device. You could also just straight up send whatever homebrew software you wanted to run directly to the device, skipping over the GBA flash card entirely. This made Wi-Fi Me especially useful for developers of homebrew applications, who were constantly having to test different versions of their software. With this, they could just build it and test it on a real DS wirelessly. Alternatively, you could also use the same method to just send yourself download play versions of games if you had the files for them. But they're kind of useless without another friend to play them with, so I don't know why you would do that, and I don't know why I'm telling you you could do that. Another exploit from around the same time was Pet.Me. Pet.Me was an exploit that worked almost the same as Wi-Fi Me, but this time exploiting a Nintendogs feature called Bark Mode. In Bark Mode, you could wirelessly transfer your dog over to your friend's copy of the game, or vice versa. This feature used the same transmittable signal as DS download play, so same ordeal. Take a modded Wi-Fi card, and instead of 1 dog to your friend, send over 3,000 dogs worth of information, causing the game to buffer overflow and tell it to boot out of the GBA slot. These exploits are really cool, but they're not really that practical for the average person to use. Not many people had access to, or probably any real desire to go and buy an entire Wi-Fi card just to do what the Pass.Me did already. But there was one other hack from around this time that was extremely useful to the average homebrewer, and that was Flash.Me. Flash.Me, unlike previous methods, wasn't just a way to run DS Homebrew. It was a permanent overwrite of your system's firmware. When installed, it is visually identical to an unmodded DS, but with a few key differences under the hood. The first difference being a recovery mode. One risk of running Homebrew is that someone out there could, in theory, make a malicious Homebrew app. Something that, say, wipes your entire system memory, making your DS completely unusable. Flash.Me added a new recovery mode in a bit of free space in your firmware to bring your DS back to a functional state if something like this were to happen. The second feature was an optional removal of the health and safety warning and boot jingle when you first start up the device, which I don't know why anyone would opt in to install. How could you ever want to remove that iconic little sound when you boot up your DS? I like it a lot. I find it sacrilegious that removing it was even an option, but I digress. The third and final feature was the main reason you'd install this, and it was the ability to boot from the GBA port in DS mode without any Pass.Me-like device inserted. Something very appealing to some people. Yay! To install Flash.Me, you would obviously need a way to boot into your GBA flash card initially with Pass.Me or some other method. But once you installed it, you didn't need it anymore, and you could probably just use it as a doorstop or something from now on. Normally, I wouldn't talk about the intricacies of installing a patch like this, because it's usually not that interesting. But installing the Flash.Me patch is fucking insane. Flash.Me installs its firmware patch by exploiting the chip where the DS's firmware is stored. The firmware chip is split into into two halves. One that is not writable, where the majority of the firmware is stored, and the other half that is writable for all of the stuff that you can modify, like your name, the date, the color of your menu. FlashMe exploits this chip by somehow making the entire thing writable, allowing it to overwrite the firmware entirely. How do you make the entire chip writable, you may ask? By sticking a fucking nail in it! I'm not joking. This is not a bit or a joke or a goof. How you install this FlashMe firmware patch is you launch the app, you initiate the process, then you open up the battery compartment of your DS, and for some reason, there is a little hole that directly leads to the SL1 chip where your firmware lies. You then take a nail, or a screwdriver, or anything conductive really, and just shove it in there. This bridges the two halves of the SL1 chip, making the entire thing writable and allowing FlashMe to do its thing. It makes sense, I guess. But this is still just insane. The fucking shove a nail in there exploit. This should have been called Violate Me. Anyways. What are we talking about? All these other exploits are really cool, but they all do accomplish the same end goal, which is to boot a GBA flashcard in DS mode. And almost all flashcards at this point could still only boot homebrew applications, no actual ROMs yet. It wouldn't be until the end of September of 2005 that the first dent in NeoFlash's monopoly on running genuine DS games was made. In September of 2005, a hacker named Kane published the first ever DS ROM patcher that would allow DS ROMs to work with GBA cartridges other than NeoFlash. But it was not perfect. It still only worked with a handful of flashcards, and it still wasn't as good as the NeoFlash was. Over the next few months into the fall and winter of 2005, there was a very slow burn of DS ROMs becoming more and more viable and functional on non-NeoFlash GBA cartridges. But a world where any DS ROM would work on any GBA flashcard was within reach at this point. Improvements were being made all the time to patchers, and many people were very excited to try any and every new patcher or tool that claimed to make any kind of breakthrough in running DS games successfully. Many were desperate and excited enough to try anything, and in October, just before Halloween, a new solution was posted up on a few homebrew sites. One that would become very infamous in the DS hacking community. Sometime in October of 2005, this file was uploaded to a few DS homebrew sites. romloader.nds, a DS homebrew application claiming to be, as the name suggests, a ROM loader. The README included with it claimed that it would automatically patch any raw, unpatched DS ROM as it was loaded on the DS itself. If what this was claiming to be was real, an application that could boot any game from a clean ROM dump without any pre-patching would be extremely exciting and enticing, and a huge leap forward for the homebrew piracy scene. So when it popped up, quite a few eager people popped it on their flashcard and gave it a try. But as you could probably guess from the sinister way in which I'm talking about this, in reality what it did was far less exciting. When loaded on a DS, ROMloader will not load any DS ROMs like it claims. Instead, you will be greeted by a realistic brick wall image on the top screen. Any unsuspecting homebrewer that installed this might think, I guess it was too good to be true. Damn, I guess I'll just go back to playing my other homebrew, I guess. What the fuck? ROMloader's brick image was more than just an image. It was a symbol telling you effectively what had just happened to your DS. In the background before this brick image is loaded, ROMloader does a few different things. First, it'll try and wipe all of the contents on your flash cartridge. Second, it will try and wipe the firmware on the flash cartridge itself, making it unusable. And third, it will attempt to wipe the entirety of your DS's firmware. In its entirety. That's two entirities to show you how much you are entirely fucked. Once all three of these things have happened, only then does it load the brick image. If you see it, you are looking at what your DS now functionally is. A brick. Joke's on him, this actually works perfect for me. It will not turn on anymore. It will not do anything anymore. The only way to reverse ROMloader's effects is if you had the FlashMe patch installed, with which you could use its recovery mode feature to reflash your firmware and bring it back to a functional state. If you did not have FlashMe installed, you are fucked. This seems like it made waves through the DS hacking community. All over every forum there were warnings not to download this, not to run it under any circumstances. It even made a bit of mainstream news headlines. The headline of Nintendo DS virus being created is very intriguing. From a technology standpoint, it's a very cool piece of software to be able to do this. Most people who unwittingly installed it though do not share that opinion. After all of the hype died down a little and people were well aware of what this homebrew program actually did, the previously anonymous creator stepped forward to claim responsibility and reveal himself. Who was responsible? None other than the Dark Fader, the creator of that original Metroid Prime hack all those months ago. Remember? With the bunch of wires? In a blog on his personal website, he came forward talking about how he originally made the virus for fun, after being inspired by a similar PSP virus that had been released weeks earlier. His intention with releasing it was to draw attention to just how easy it would be for someone to create a malicious homebrew application, and how important measures like FlashMe were if you were running untrusted homebrew. He outlined exactly what the ROMs were, how they worked, what they did, and explained in detail with links how to recover your DS if you did happen to have FlashMe installed, and also said that he was sorry in general about the entire thing and the whole panic it caused in the media and the larger DS scene. It was now December of 2005, and after a very long and eventful year of DS hacking, it was now currently possible to pretty reliably play most DS game ROMs on most Game Boy Flash carts through some kind of Pass Me, Flash Me, or Something Me method. Things were looking pretty good, and small improvements and new products were constantly being launched, but they still all relied on current methods and exploits to work, and would all still require the GBA port to function. But at the very dawn of 2006, all of that was about to change. Kind of. On January 24th, 2006, a hacker by the name of Martin Korth updated his website. Martin Korth was the author of a very famous Game Boy Advance emulator, No Cache GBA. I think that's how you pronounce it, maybe NOS GBA, like the car thing. On top of creating this emulator, he also had reverse engineered the entirety of the Game Boy Advance and had a write-up of every single aspect of the console and how it worked. On this day, January 24th, he had announced that he had done the same thing to the Nintendo DS. He had reverse engineered, dumped the BIOS, figured out how it encrypts and decrypts its games. Every part of how the DS operated was now on display for anyone and everyone to go look at on his website for free. This is crazy. Basically, what this means is that from this point forward, almost any homebrew idea or concept you could come up with was now a possibility. The stage was now set for a slot 1 flash cart that didn't require anything to be in the GBA port to exist. But they didn't pop up immediately. People started using his findings to improve current homebrew methods. Near the beginning of 2006, new PassMes started to pop up. No pass devices were versions of the PassMe that did the exact same thing, but now that the DS's encryption was figured out, there was no need to use a real DS game to pass along its header. Manufacturers could just write new headers for their cartridges, the exact same as official cartridges used. But then, in about springtime 2006, there started to be murmurings around. Talk of something more on the way. In March of 2006, many teams and companies started announcing they had slot 1 flashcards in development. Flashcards that worked from the DS slot, being functional with slot 2 completely empty. Better yet, they also claimed this new type of homebrew cartridge would not need any kind of pass-me or no-pass-like device either, having it built right in. A lot of companies talked about making a slot 1 card, but the first actual product would come in September of 2006 with the Ninja DS, and it looked fucked up, bro. It stuck way out of the DS. It used a full-size SD card. It didn't support all ROMs or homebrew yet, but it was technically, as far as I can tell, the first ever slot 1 flash card. It would not be the only one for long though. Ever since Martin Korth's reverse engineering of the DS, there was heaps of companies all trying to get a slot 1 flash card working first. Ninja DS happened to be the first, but within this fall season of 2005, there were tons releasing. The next month in October, the DS Extreme released. This was the first slot 1 flash card to sit flush with the DS, but it used a micro USB cable instead of an SD card. Then again, just another month later in November, the Ace card released, which was the first to use a proper micro SD. It was like whack-a-mole. The era of slot 1 flash cards was here, but they weren't perfect yet. Again, ROM support was weird, and all of these ones all cost anywhere from $50 to $120 US. But then, in December of 2005, just in time for the Christmas season, the most famous homebrew device probably of all time, the thing this entire video has been leading up to, the R4 was released. Fuck. Sorry, I got distracted. The R4 is probably one of the most infamous names in all of Homebrew or console hacking ever. Everybody with even the slightest console experience knows or has at least seen this guy right here. But it wasn't always like this. When the R4 first came out, it was just another flash card amongst the sea of other ones. What made it stand out though was it was only $30 compared to the $50 to $100 ones that came before it. The other reason was probably how easy it was to copy. I don't know anything about manufacturing a flash card like this, but I do know there was a shit ton of R4 clones out there. Drastically more than there was of any other brand of cartridge. A quick side note also, some of them are really funny. Look at this, R4 FIFA World Cup Edition. Excuse me? R4 Iron Man Edition. The R4, sponsored by the 2011 Nicolas Cage movie, Drive Angry. It's on the box and it's on the cartridge. What the fuck, bro? Did this studio pay for this? What? This isn't even a popular movie. Why does this exist? Someone bought this. Anyways, I assume that whatever R4 did to make their cartridge so cheap was very easily replicatable. And I think it's this mass amount of clones, as well as R4 pushing so many updates, that made it kind of like the poster child for DS Homebrew. But whatever the case, after the R4's release in the year of 2007, flashcards went nuclear. The R4, its many clones, and tons of other flashcard manufacturers were everywhere. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. If you were around and you had a DS from 2007 onwards, you definitely saw a flash cartridge in the wild if you didn't have one yourself. There was the R4, the R4 clones, the iTouch ID, the N card, the DSTT, and my favorite, the M3 DS Reel. This is my personal flash card that I had when I was a kid. This little blue and gray cartridge is almost identical to an R4, but this one specifically holds a very special place in my heart. After about 2007, after all the kinks had been worked out in flashcards, they were everywhere. An insane number of people used them. Anyone with even the slightest bit of hacking knowledge was using one of these. Or even people who just knew that person. Or even people who just shopped at Walmart. There was a point in time where you could buy a basic DS flashcard at Walmart disguised as a songs and movie player. Following the rise in popularity of them, Nintendo did try and ban them in a few countries. Some they even succeeded in, but it didn't matter. They were out there now. At the height of their popularity in probably like 2008, you could probably just find one on the ground if you really looked hard enough. The DS had been cracked. For better or for worse, anyone who wanted to run pirated games or homebrew could now very accessibly do so. And that's it. That is the story of how one of the most famous homebrew devices came to be. These days, you don't really need a flashcard anymore. Most people who are going to play DS homebrew or run backups of DS games just use a 3DS. But they're still worth talking about. My M3 DS Reel right here holds, like I said, a very special place in my heart. And if you are going to use one of the original DSs, they are still the best way to run homebrew. I don't think anyone is using Nintendogs anymore. There's even still a bit of a community for them. The DS Pico is a brand new flashcard that came out this year. It is a completely open source flashcard that runs on a Raspberry Pi RP21E40. You can build one of these yourself. You can modify the software that runs it. I love it. It's just really cool that people are still improving the DS flashcard in 2026. But yeah, that's the story of how Mr. R4 and all of his flashcard brethren came to be. I hope you learned something. I hope I've instilled a new desire to fuck around with your DS flashcard if you have one. Also, if you have any stories about your childhood and flashcards, please let me know about them in the comments. I would literally love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, honestly. I'm sorry it's been so long again. New, shorter, less intensive video coming much sooner than this one. Thank you for waiting. Have such a wonderful day or night or laundry or whatever you're doing while watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.